Now, bottom of 239, Alvin Plantinga, you see his dates there, 1932 to the present, still alive, but retired a few years ago from his professorship at Notre Dame. He taught at Calvin College for quite a number of years and then went on to Notre Dame, but he's a son of the Christian Reformed Church. He went to Calvin College, studied philosophy with Harry Jellema there. Jellema was also the teacher of Cornelius Van Til. Now, Van Til was a much older man, but Van Til studied with Jellema at the beginning of Jellema's career, and Plantinga studied with him toward the end of that. Plantinga is a very distinguished philosopher. Distinguished, respected not only in Christian circles, but in non-Christian circles as well. Now, when I studied philosophy at Princeton from 1957 to 1961, it was almost unheard of to find an evangelical or Reformed Christian in the discipline of philosophy. It would be just amazing if you had a philosophy seminar at Princeton and somebody were to suggest that the God of the Bible provided an answer to some philosophical problem. You would probably get laughed out of that classroom, but it was just so unusual that it would almost never happen. Now, there's been a great change since 1961 down to the present. Beginning about 1970, there was quite a remarkable influx of Christians into the discipline of philosophy. People like Plantinga, Walter Storff, Paul Helm is another one, Robert Adams, Marilyn Adams, quite a lot of Merrill Westphal, just a large number of Christians entered into the discipline of philosophy. Dallas Willard, I keep thinking of names here. And it's really there's a very strong movement of Christian philosophy in the country. There's a Christian philosophical journal called Faith and Philosophy. There's a Christian philosophical society called the Journal of I keep thinking Journal and Faith and Philosophy and various combinations. I'm sure that'll come to me eventually. But there's a Christian philosophical journal. There are many Christians who are well known, who are even prominent in philosophical circles. And when I say prominent, I mean respected, again, not only by Christians, but also by non-Christians. A lot of this development has been due to Alvin Plantinga. He has become very prominent. He's known as one of the two or three most important philosophers of religion in the world, certainly very important in the sphere of epistemology. And so we have a lot to thank Plantinga for. This is a great time if you're a Christian and you're interested in philosophy. This is a great time for you to go and do graduate work and get your doctor's degree and enter into the philosophical world. 50 years ago, you would have been cut off without comment. But nowadays, the philosophers are respecting traditional Christian people as never before, and you'd probably get a more favorable reception in philosophical departments around the world than you would get from the usual religious studies department or the usual theology department in a liberal seminary or liberal university. So Plantinga, a very, very important, very impressive figure, certainly. He's very much concerned about epistemology, and he's developed a kind of epistemology which brings God into it, and he calls it Reformed epistemology. it is significant that he believes he's following some of the leads of John Calvin in claiming and developing this system of Reformed epistemology. So let's follow him and see what he has in mind. Page 240, Plantinga distinguishes between warrant and justification. Now you remember I distinguished earlier between externalism and internalism in theory of knowledge. In internalism, we believe something because of other beliefs that we hold, or because of other subjective, other things within our subjectivity. So we justify our beliefs internally. We justify our beliefs by pointing within ourselves. An externalist believes that our beliefs are justified because of their connection to reality, because they're connected to something outside themselves, because they're connected to something beyond ourselves. Plantinga is an externalist rather than an internalist. It's been traditional in philosophy to distinguish between three elements of knowledge. That knowledge includes belief, true belief, justified true belief. So to have knowledge, your belief must be true and it must be justified. Knowledge is justified true belief. Now around 1960, there was a controversy about that definition. There was a man named Gettier who taught at Wayne State University in Michigan, and actually it's interesting because Plantinga taught there too, and Plantinga knew about Gettier, and Gettier cited some counterexamples to this definition, some cases in which we would call something knowledge, but in which it's not justified true belief, or cases where we admit that something is a justified true belief, but we would not call it knowledge. So this definition has been controversial, and I think it's been controversial because of the ambiguity of the term justified, where we use the term justify, of course, in epistemological terms. A justification is when you tell somebody what basis you have for believing something. When you try to justify your belief, to tell why you believe it, and show that your belief is not just belief, but is also knowledge. Now, I think it's very difficult to define what constitutes a justification for belief, especially if you're not a believer in God. I think ultimately God is the norm. God is the one who justifies, not only in soteriology, but also in knowledge. Our beliefs are justified insofar as they agree with God's word. But of course, secular philosophers aren't willing to admit that, and so they've tried to find other ways of justifying claims to knowledge. Plantinga is a Christian, of course, and he doesn't object to having God's word involved in there somewhere, although frankly I don't see a whole lot of role for God's word in Plantinga's epistemology. He often sort of writes almost as if he were a secularist, although at points he indicates that he is not. But Plantinga finds fault with the term justified here and would like to substitute for it the term warranted. The distinction that he makes is that a justification is internal. I justify beliefs because I point to something within me that justifies those beliefs. A warrant is based on something external. It's the connection between my thinking and the world. So he has written many articles, of course, but three major books that set forth his Reformed Epistemology position. These 3 books are called Warrant, and the first volume is called Warrant, the Current Discussion. The second volume is called Warranted Proper Function, where he sets forth his epistemological position. And then the third volume is called Warrant and Christian Theism. That's not the exact name, but that's what it's about. It's about Warrant and Christian theism. He says that the true warrant that justifies human knowledge is the proper functioning of our epistemic equipment. That is the capabilities of knowledge that God gives to us. And so Plantinga wants to say that we justify beliefs by showing that our epistemic abilities are in proper order, okay? That they're working properly, that they're functioning properly. Plantinga now argues that contrary to W.K. Clifford, belief in the Christian God does not need to be subject to the evidentialist demand. Evidentialism says you may not believe in anything without proper evidence. Well, Plantinga says that that's not true. He opposes that, and he says that belief in the Christian God must not be subject to that demand. We have the right to believe in God without evidence. For Christians, he says, belief in God is a foundational belief, even a properly basic belief, a belief by which we build other items of knowledge rather than seeking to build our belief in God on something that's more ultimate. So God is part of the foundation. Positively, our belief in God comes through the proper functioning of our cognitive faculties in certain situations. For example, when you're standing out at night and you're moved by the starry heavens to say someone must have made all this, you're moved to believe in God. This belief is, a lot of people would say that this is a cosmological argument, but sometimes it's not. I mean, there are a lot of people who are not capable of constructing arguments, and yet they're amazed when they look at the starry heavens above. Kant mentioned this, for example. I'm sorry, I'm teaching. So Kant, let me get back to Plantinga. I was interrupted a little bit. But belief in God then is a foundational belief, not a belief that comes out of other beliefs. And it comes through the proper functioning of our cognitive faculties in certain situations. There's something about those starry heavens that makes us exclaim, yes, there is a God. And Plantinga equates that with Calvin's sensus deitatis, the sense of deity. It's not necessarily by an argument. It may be just an overwhelming sensation, an overwhelming feeling that comes upon you. Now, this belief is a basic belief, but for Plantinga, basic beliefs are defeasible. That means they can be defeated. They can be rebutted by evidence, for example, against God's existence. Of course, the believer may also find defeaters to those defeaters. They can find defeaters to that supposed evidence. So you see how Plantinga understands belief in God. It's a belief that comes at us when our knowledge faculties, our cognitive equipment, if you will, is working rightly, and is in a place, is in a position, like under the starry heavens, is in a position where justified beliefs tend to come into the mind. Now, some questions about this. Why should we take belief in God as properly basic? Plantinga, as over against classical foundationalism, believes that we should not limit basic beliefs to self-evident truths and such. But what criterion is there for choosing beliefs that are properly basic? Here is the great pumpkin objection. Can't you just take anything and make it properly basic? For example, you know the great pumpkin from the Peanuts comic strip. The great pumpkin is Linus's made-up religion. Linus, every Halloween, goes to sit in the pumpkin patch, and he says that according to his theology, every Halloween, if you are sitting in the most sincere pumpkin patch, it has to be sincere, as you're sitting in the most sincere pumpkin patch, the great pumpkin will arise and bring gifts to all the little boys and girls. Well, you can imagine a 5-year-old kid inventing a religion like that. And we're asking the question, can't we make the great pumpkin properly basic? Well, says Plantinga, you can't just make anything properly basic. The relevant examples of basic and non-basic beliefs will come from those that are accepted as such in one's own community. If you are raised in a Muslim family, well, you will take Allah, you'll take the Quran as a properly basic belief. If you're raised in a Christian home, you'll take Jesus and God as part of your foundation, as part of your properly basic beliefs. But nobody is raised in a community that honors the great pumpkin, so the great pumpkin is excluded there. But then the other questions come up. Okay, so I'm justified as a Christian growing up in a Christian home. I'm justified in taking God and taking Jesus as part of my foundation, part of the foundation of my beliefs. And somebody else who's raised in a Muslim home takes his Islamic religion as part of his foundation. And in Plantinga, according to Plantinga, those are both justified. I mean, sure, you know, we have a right to do that. If you're 4 years old or 5 years old, where else are you going to go for knowledge? That's all you know. Of course you believe that these are true because you've been raised to believe that these are true. And you really have no alternative. These are the authorities that tell you what is true, and you have no basis for questioning it. So you grow up believing. One grows up believing in Jesus, another grows up believing in Allah, and they are each justified in doing what they do. They've done everything they can. They've done everything that they can be reasonably expected to do to justify those beliefs. But still, they grow up disagreeing as to the true God. Well, so Plantinga says, what do we do about the fact that people disagree about what's basic? Well, Plantinga says, of course, members of other communities may disagree, and some will be rationally justified in taking a different basis. Some of them will take Islam as basic. Some will take atheism as basic. So there will be disagreements that are hard to overcome. But that's not a problem for Christian beliefs. Disagreements are to be expected. In Jesus' own time, there were people who disbelieved in Jesus. Paul all the time encountered people who disbelieved in Jesus, who disbelieved in the Christian faith, both Gentiles and Jews. So the Bible tells us that this is the way things are going to be. It doesn't lead us to think that everybody is going to agree with us. Now, but does this mean that all these different beliefs are true? No, certainly not. The fact that people disagree as to their basic beliefs doesn't mean that every basic belief is true. The fact that everybody is justified, see, the Christian is justified in taking the Bible as his basic belief, Muslim is justified in taking the Quran as his basic belief. These are justified beliefs, but they are not necessarily both true. There are legitimate arguments about that. Well, how then does this conclusion help the Christian? It shows that the Christian is rational in taking belief in God as properly basic. It doesn't show that the Christian's belief is true. It is defeasible, and as Plantinga indicated, we need to confront arguments from people who hold different basic beliefs, and those who oppose it have the right to take their beliefs as properly basic. So Plantinga's religious epistemology requires supplementation to show that Christian belief is not only properly basic, but that it's also warranted or true. Plantinga himself has offered arguments to this effect in his other writings. There's a book that he writes called God and Other Minds. There's another book that he published called God, Freedom, and Evil. That's the more popular form. The more technical version is The Nature of Necessity. And in these books, Plantinga develops an ontological argument, for example, based on modal logic. He also has written a paper called something like 18 or 19 pretty good arguments for the existence of God. Look that up, Google that, and you'll find it's a very interesting paper if you know something about the technical language of philosophy. So Plantinga does offer arguments. He's not saying that argument is irrelevant. He's not saying that you should believe in God by blind faith. What point is he making then? Well, he's saying that you are rational if you believe in God without arguments. Okay? You don't have to have an argument to believe in God. W.K. Clifford is wrong. You have a perfect right. You're perfectly respectable if you believe in God without arguments. Okay? That doesn't prove that Christianity is true, and of course you need further argumentation if you get into an argument about that. So, now, see, I want you to be aware of where we are in the history of thought. I think I put this data, this chart up on the board for you at one point. Anselm of Canterbury, who developed the ontological argument, makes a very strong claim for that argument. Basically, what Anselm says is that if we understand the word God, we know that God exists. So the term, the phrase God exists, the sentence God exists, is a logically necessary sentence. It cannot possibly be false. Sort of like a tautology almost. Thomas Aquinas rejected Anselm's argument, and Thomas Aquinas offers us a somewhat lesser claim. Thomas Aquinas, remember, said that the existence of God is demonstrable. He asked the question, can it be demonstrated that God exists? And he answers, yes, it can be demonstrated. Then you get into people like Pascal and Joseph Butler, who don't seem to be arguing that the existence of God can be demonstrated. They seek to argue that the existence of God and the truth of Christianity are highly probable. But you see, we've moved downward. We've moved from logically necessary to demonstrable to highly probable. And now here we are with Plantinga, who's making an even lesser claim, namely that Christianity is rational. In other words, you're not crazy if you're a Christian believer. Now that's fine, I think his argument is good. I think it proves what he's intending to prove, but it's not proving very much. And to prove, to get to the conclusions of traditional apologetics, Anselm, Aquinas, Butler, and Pascal, in order to get to those kinds of conclusions, you need supplementation. Furthermore, I would say that biblically speaking, it's not enough to believe in God as properly basic in Plantinga's sense. Now, when Plantinga says God is properly basic, that sounds like God is our presupposition. God is our foundation on which we build everything. But remember, that's not quite true. Plantinga believes that our belief in God can be refuted. So properly basic does not mean that our belief in God is the standard of rationality, or that our belief in God determines what we think about evidences and all. No. Belief in God, according to Plantinga, can be refuted by evidence. It can be refuted by logic. So it doesn't govern logic. It doesn't govern evidence. So now I think Scripture makes a stronger claim than that. I think according to Scripture, God is not just a properly basic belief, which we hold because we were raised in a Christian home, let's say, but that can be refuted by someone who is raised in a different kind of home. Rather, in the Bible, God is the Lord of all, and therefore the Lord of all reasoning. God is not just properly basic, God is a presupposition. And unlike Plantinga's properly basic beliefs, a presupposition is not defeasible as long as it is held. For a presupposition serves as the very criterion for truth and falsity. It serves as the very criterion of epistemic justification. And those who hold contrary presuppositions have no right to hold them. Okay, Plantinga says that the Muslim, so far as properly basic beliefs is concerned, the Muslim has just as much right to hold his as Christians have to hold theirs. But in Romans 1, Paul says that those who disbelieve in the God of the Bible have no right to hold their beliefs. They have no excuse because God is clearly revealed in the world in which he's made. So those who hold contrary presuppositions have no right to hold them. They willfully violate the clear knowledge of the true God revealed to them, and they will be judged for their unbelief. And this, I think, is what Calvin taught. So I don't think that Plantinga has read as deeply in Calvin as he ought to read if he's going to call his epistemology a reformed epistemology.